KNX In-Depth, along with Mike Simpson. I'm Charles Feldman.
Happy birthday, KNX. 100 years, still standing tall. Southern California's only all-news outlet. Signal that is one of the most powerful in the country. Turn us on at night, just keep on driving. Since the station switched to the current all-news format in 1969, we have covered stories big and small, local, national, international, that have impacted all of our lives. But the news business is not always easy.
You know, I would toast you, but you can't drink because you're running the board.
I press the buttons, but you can drink.
But I'll toast myself. Can you believe that there was a time when we had to do our jobs without the internet? No, really? Yeah. When we had to literally cut and splice together pieces of audio tape on these giant reel-to-reel machines to get sound on the air. When reporters out in the field had to stop at payphones. What's a payphone?
I did see one 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Oh, that's the thing where you put the money in.
The last one, yeah.
Yeah, wow. They had to do that in order to call in stories. Well, we're going to mark 100 years strong for KNX by traveling down memory lane with some of the people who have kept this place running. Let's start with Mike Landa. He was hired back in 1969. Shortly after we went all news and went on to become the KNX Orange County Bureau Chief, he grew up in Southern California listening to, what else? KNX.
As a child, as a young person, I listened to KNX. I used to love to hear Gunsmoke. I would listen to Bob and Ray, two very famous comedians who were absolutely hilarious. Stan Freberg was another comedian. And then in the 60s, one of my favorite shows was to listen to in the morning to Bob Crane before I went to school. Very talented man. So KNX for me was always the best, I thought. And then for the opportunity to go there and work, I couldn't believe it. To actually be in the same building where, you know, these famous people were broadcasters. It's really terrific for me. As for the station itself, we have the leadership of George Nicolau. And I believe he was an incredible executive leader for KNX for many years. I mean, we won so many awards, you know, Golden Mics and national awards. And it was because of his leadership. He always stuck to the journalistic principles. You know, he always wanted KNX to be the very best, and he inspired us to work hard to be the best. And I think people in Los Angeles believe that to be true, and they respected us, and they knew we were going to be the best we could be journalistically. And so, you know, he would do editorials. George Nicolau would do editorials, and people would respond to those. It was important issues of the day that he would bring up and people would you know, talk about. And so I think we were a big part of the Los Angeles community for many years. And, you know, I would get people who talk to me and they say, you know what? He says, for example, a young man would say to me, you know what? I listen to KNX. I said, what? You're a pretty young man. And he says, well, here's how it goes. Parents would drive their kids to school. They turn on the radio, and the station they would listen to would be KNX.
So, what has been the biggest change since the late 60s that we report the news? Landa says it's the tools of the trade. They have changed drastically.
The technology. Teletype machine. Now, if I say that to most young people, they say, what? And it's true. So we had, like, automatic typewriters that provided the news on long reams of paper. And one of my jobs was to go in there and pull off the stories and bring them in off the teletype machine. And we also had a sound effect we were famous for. Even when teletype machines were gone, we still had the sound of a teletype machine, you know, in the background. Manual typewriters. We spent the day pounding on those manual typewriters, nothing electric or, you know, like computers. The soundtracks were on 8-track cartridges. That was famous in the 70s. You put those in your car for music. So we used 8-track cartridges to play the sounds of the people that we interviewed. And editing was done it was rather manually intensive. We used razor edits, cut and slice. You would take a piece of tape and you'd get a razor blade and you'd cut it here and cut it there, splice it together, and that's how you did edits. Today we do it electronically. Another thing is, we weren't allowed to be involved in the technology. Union engineers were very strong when I started at KNX. In fact, we had 2 engineers in the studio at one time. This is really kind of funny. So there'd be an engineer working, with the announcer, and then behind him was a guy who threw a switch to go to the network. You had to have a whole guy just to throw a switch. And then they were very, very protective of their domain. I remember one time I was standing there telling him how to edit some stories, and I put my hand on the Ampex tape machine, and he looked at me and he says, "Get your hand off of there." And I says, "What?" He says, "Do not touch the equipment." That's how strong the union was.
I'm touching the equipment. Mike Landa, longtime KNX Orange County Bureau Chief.
And what have we learned? Now we turn switches on and off ourselves.
That's right. Can you imagine having 2 engineers in here? Are you eating something?
No. When we come back, we will hear from some of the current KNX players.